Hi, it's Jan Beta, and I'm back here with the Amiga 600 that I repaired in the last video. You can check that video out in the corner there, or it's also linked in the description. And in that video I stated that all of these machines from the era that have SMD electrolytic capacitors have leaky capacitors, basically. I fixed that by replacing one little capacitor in the reset circuitry. Spoiler alert. The rest of the capacitors in this machine are still the original capacitors. This has not been recapped, so that's the plan for today. And I've set up my various soldering tools for that, my regular soldering iron and my cheapo hot air station. And yeah, we're going to see how this goes. Not particularly experienced with SMD soldering, but usually it works pretty well. I'm going to briefly show you some methods, or at least mention some methods that you can try to do this. I am going to do it the way that I've found to be the most, or the least destructive. So yeah, let's just do this. Let's open up the machine at first. So the best thing about shooting two videos about the same machine in a row is that I didn't even put the screws back in. I should be able to just level this up. And yeah, I didn't put the kickstart switcher in. So there's one screw holding this down, I think. I'd have to remove. Holding the PCB down. Of course we have to get the PCB out of the case here. That's the first step. And it's not particularly easy with these because you have to kind of angle it because of the joystick ports protruding through there and the other ports. Oh, there's another screw. Of course, there's another screw. Nearly destroyed this. Okay, so this is not easy to remove. It's non-trivial because the ports on the back protrude a bit through the case and the joystick ports on the side also protrude. So we kind of have to angle it out, and I don't know, I'm just going to try my best here. It's just some kind of weird movement you have to do. And it doesn't help that there's... Maybe we should just remove the switch here. It's the wrong switch anyway. This is a 3-position switch. We only need a 2-position switch. So somebody didn't really think much about this. Okay, removing this kickstart switcher altogether. For now, probably going to put it back in at some point. There we go. That's easier with the kickstart switcher removed. Basically, as soon as you have the joystick ports out, the rest just comes out. So the next step is to get all these standoff screw terminal thingies out. I have a socket for that. That should hopefully fit. Yeah. Whoa. Okay, this hasn't been out, I guess. These were really tightly in there. So some of these tabs that usually connect to the top half of the RF shield, which is just a big metal can basically, that was missing on this Amiga because I don't think it fits with the kickstart switcher and stuff. So yeah, usually it's okay to just remove it. It's there for compliance with the FCC rules basically, and not serves any useful function really. Okay, so this is just clipped on. So here's the PCB. we are going to replace the through-hole electrolytic capacitors, but what's more important are these SMD electrolytic capacitors, so surface mount electrolytic capacitors, because the ones from this era, like the early 90s to mid 90s, are all of very bad quality basically. And most of the devices from that era that have these have problems with capacitor leakage. So I recommend just replacing them, no matter how good they look. In this one you can see that they are kind of at an angle. They don't look very straight, so they probably have some gassing going on and some leakage. You can also spot some of the pads are a bit dull. So in this area you can see the pads are a bit dull for the lower capacitors here. The upper ones look better, but yeah, sometimes you can't see anything, like they might be broken, but you can't tell from the outside. One hint that you also get is a fishy smell, because the electrolyte smells fishy, especially if it's heated up. So if I start soldering on this, it's going to probably smell like fish. It did so for the last video when I replaced that one capacitor already. Sometimes the machines even start smelling like fish after running for a while, so this one does that, I think. So when it gets warm, it smells fishy. It is capacitor leakage. So I'm going to work with a lot of flux today and with a lot of solder, so I have my self-made solder fume extractor set up here, which is basically just a PC fan in a fancy case with a filter. And yeah, basically it's most importantly you get the fumes away from your face and your lungs, and this sucks the fumes in and filters some of it. You want to do this in a well-ventilated room and don't inhale too much of the fumes, because they are not very healthy, to put it mildly. So yeah, I'm going to start, I think, with the through-hole stuff. I'm going to desolder that. I'm also going to desolder the keyboard connector, because there are two SMD caps right behind there that are very difficult to desolder while this is in place. So I'd rather desolder this thing altogether, which I think is easier than reaching in there without damaging it with a soldering iron. So I'm going to use my desoldering station for this, that I'm also going to link in the description, as many of my tools are going to be linked there. Let's just get right into it. I'm just going to desolder all the through-hole components. First of all, what I'm going to do is to take pictures of the positions of the capacitors so I don't get them confused. Sometimes Commodore messed up the silk screening even and put the wrong polarity on the markings on the board. In this case, I think the markings are okay as far as I can see. I'm still going to take like close-up pictures of all the sections that have capacitors so I don't get them confused, and get the right values in the right position, and get the polarities right. So that's the first step. And to make desoldering a bit easier, I'm just going to put some fresh solder on all the joints I want to desolder. First the through-hole stuff. Just going to do that now, like the connector and the through-hole capacitors. These are between the little components on the back here, so it's not that trivial to desolder them. Just going to be very careful about that. I'm also using some flux. because that usually helps. My fume extractor is running here. Okay, that one was good, I guess. You don't want to use any force for that. You just want to desolder it to a degree that you don't need force to pull it on the other side there. So this one came out really easily. Yeah, let's do the same for the other ones. And I'm just going to stop talking and do it, basically. Okay, got the capacitors out really smoothly. You have to be really careful because there's large ground planes on this board that basically suck away all the heat that you're applying. So be very careful, have patience with these through-hole components as well. It's easy to rip the pads off or to rip the plating off or to lift some traces off the board. You don't want that. I am now going to desolder this keyboard connector here. I think I want to mark the direction it goes, something like that. This is the way it goes. We're going to wash that off later anyway, but just to make sure we have the correct orientation there. I'm basically going to do it the same way I did for the capacitors. Just adding some extra solder to the pins and adding some flux and then desoldering one by one in a thorough and very patient way. None of which is any of my strengths, admittedly. But yeah, let's just go. Okay, ideally, that should be pretty much it. Let's see. Yeah, I think the pins are pretty much loose. Let's see. There we go. It wasn't too bad at all. Phew. Admittedly, that was the worst part for me. I feared this part the most. And now for the SMD components. For the SMD components, I'm pretty much going to use the same method with flux and adding fresh solder to make it easier. And yeah, I'm just going to go in there and add some solder to every solder joint and some flux. Basically, because that will make things a lot easier. And then the actual desoldering I'm going to do with the hot air station, I think, because that's the method that is the least destructive in my experience. I already did that quite successfully on a Macintosh SE30 a while ago. The problem is that if you have leaky capacitors, the solder often won't stick to the pads anymore because the leakage prevents that. And it smells fishy. These are all leaky little capacitors. Ooh, smells bad. So the problem with the A600 is that there's so little room on the PCB. Yeah, this is all, they are all so leaky that they don't take solder at all. Which is also one of the reasons why it's so difficult to do without a hot air station, basically. Ew, yeah, that smells fishy. Okay. I am going to protect plastic parts with Kapton tape that I have lying around here. This is basically heat-resistant sticky tape that you can use in multiple layers to protect like components around the components you want to desolder with hot air. And I'm going to do that. I think I want to do this like step by step, so I'm just going to tape off this area here and start there, because there's the most there are the most capacitors to replace, and then I'm going to work my way across the whole board with the hot air. Just cleaning off some solder, some excess solder I produced here. Should be careful with that as well, because you easily short out stuff, of course, on a board that's so tightly packed. So this is also the part I haven't done before, because on the Amiga 1200 the components are not as tightly packed as on this one. So I'm just going to try and eyeball it a bit. I've heard people using aluminum foil or aluminium. But I don't want to ruin this machine, so yeah, it's better to be safe than sorry, I guess. Better have a bit too much than too little protection here. Okay, I think I'm ready for this section of the board. Let's see how it goes. It sets this to around 6, feels about right. Ha! You see that resistor here? That came off as well, so we're going to have to resolder that. But yeah, otherwise it looks pretty okay. We have to do a lot of cleanup work on the pads there. There has been leakage. You can see that they are white and not shiny. And some of the legs here broke off. I think I didn't have the heat going for long enough. But otherwise it went pretty smoothly, I have to say. So no melted plastic as far as I can see. And yeah. We are going to clean up the area with some Solderwick, and we're going to replace the resistor that accidentally came loose. I think I want to apply some flux to clean off the area as well. To clean off the corrosive electrolyte that's still on there. So I'm just going to basically flood the area a bit and heat it up. Slightly. I think in the process we can also resolder the little capacitor, resistor there. Sorry if you can't see this very well. I'm trying my best to light this appropriately. There we go. So then I want to go in with my regular soldering iron and some Solderwick and clean off the pads. And I'm adding some fresh solder here. The pads all remained intact, which is a good thing, of course. think I want to resolder that resistor altogether. We should clean off those pads as well. Ah, but the pads look really good, that's cool. So no corrosion on the pads there. Okay, that's this area here pretty much cleaned up. You can see by the flux getting dark that it activated and cleaned something, which is probably the remaining leakage. I'm going to leave the Kapton tape on because we want to solder in this area. I'm then cleaning the whole area with isopropanol and Q-tips. To remove the remaining stuff, dirt, leakage that's on there probably. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Look at that. Most of this is flux. Okay, I'm putting the little resistor back in that I accidentally desoldered. So putting some flux on the pads here. And tinning one of the pads. Whoa. Okay, here we go. Okay, looks neat enough. Okay, so we're repeating this process for the rest of the capacitors, which are 5, 6. Not too many. We're going to protect some plastic parts again, like these RCA jacks. I think this is the most difficult part to protect. After the connector for the keyboard is gone, that would have been the most difficult part to not damage while desoldering with hot air. I'm just using 2 or 3 layers here. I mean, these parts you can probably still get and replace, but they are fine, so why risk damaging them? At least I think I'm still risking damaging them, but kind of want to prevent what I can. I'm going to put a bit of tape on the little disk drive connector as well, because I have plenty of that stuff. And also maybe over this little transistor there, so we don't accidentally desolder that. So I'm basically just aiming this at these solder joints, alternating sides a bit and trying to keep the airflow in a direction where there's no other components. And usually, after a little while, you can feel that it just lifts off the board. we go. Okay, that went well. Cleaning up with the regular soldering iron. I'm adding some fresh flux here, some fresh solder. That works wonders. Yeah, there we go. I want these to be as shiny as if they were new, basically, the solder pads. Yeah, there we go. That's nice. Okay. Yeah, repeat. Not going to show every capacitor in detail, I guess, so yeah, I'm just going to do the same and just protect components in the vicinity of the components I want to desolder with Kapton tape and then desolder them, like I've shown. Okay, now let's get to the actual recapping after we successfully decapped this, or whatever you want to call it. I'm using tweezers that are a little bit wider and grippy. These came with my iFixit set that I can only recommend. You also get the little socket that you can use to get these things out in there. Yeah, linked in the description. I'm grabbing the capacitors and I'm starting with the SMD ones, and I'm going to tin one of the pads, set the capacitor down, heat up the solder again so it sits in the correct position, position it with the tweezers, and then solder on the second pad. That's as easy as it gets, I guess. We have to look at the pictures we took when the capacitors were in place to determine where they go and in which direction they go. These SMD electrolytics have a marking for the negative side, so the black stripe you can see here is the negative, just like with through-hole electrolytic capacitors. And on the board you have a little plus for the positive side. And also you can see this shape that is like rounded on one end. The other side is rectangular, basically. And this has rounded corners, so the plastic base of these capacitors also has the same shape, so you can see which direction they go by that as well. As far as I've seen, the silk screen on this Amiga 600 is correct. So Commodore got something right, at least. Okay, without further ado, let's just go and see if we can replace all the SMD capacitors at first. So to make ordering these easier, I found a website that is icot.se, I think. I'm going to link that in the description as well. Where you can find capacitor lists for a number of Amigas, including the A600, that actually have all the capacitance ratings and voltage ratings and the number of capacitors you need for each. And they also have the little part number that you can then just enter on any electronic retailer's website and find the exact component you need in the exact shape you need and with the exact same properties you need. So that's what it did, and I highly recommend doing that as well. You can, of course, if you want an even more convenient way to do this, you can order a capacitor kits. These are available from a number of websites, and you can also look on eBay. You find a number of these. Make sure you get good quality capacitors. These are Panasonic FR 105 degrees rated ones. The other ones are also Panasonic, which is a good brand. There are a number of good brands you are probably going to see, but these are the ones that are linked in the website I'm going to link in the description. So without further ado, let's go and recap this Amiga. So this is incredibly difficult to do with the camera in the way, because you have to angle your workpiece quite a bit. Maybe if you do it from here. Yeah, that worked well. That's better. Okay, that went reasonably well. Okay, so I actually have to redo these two because they are 100 and I put in like 100 farad and I put in 22 because the old ones had a 22, which was, I don't know, date code or something like that. They had a 22 written on them. So I was confused and put in 22 microfarad ones, which are wrong in this position. We need 100 microfarad ones. Let me rectify that. That pretty much concludes the portion with the surface mount stuff. I think we can now safely remove our Kapton tape and see how much damage we actually did. It's not much, I guess. It looks good. So this stuff works. So let's put our keyboard connector back in, I guess, at first, after we've cleaned the board around there. I'm just soldering one pin so that I can sit it flush on the board, which it now is. Wasn't much of a problem, so there we go. Yeah, good as new, I guess. Looking good. Okay, on with the through-hole capacitors. I'm just going to put them all in according to my pictures that I took. The long leg is always the positive. I noticed that these 1000 microfarad capacitors that I ordered are 10 volts rated only. Whereas the ones that were on there are 16 volts rated. But that doesn't matter in this case because the 1000 microfarad capacitors only ever see 5 volts. So that's reasonably, there's a lot of headroom still. And Commodore probably used whatever they could find, 10 volts, 16 volts. These are fine, is all I want to say. Okay, time for cleaning this up and testing it eventually. Okay, there we go, ready for testing. Whew. Okay, whew. This is basically all set up, except for plugging it in and testing it. So let's see what it does. Will it explode? Do I have all the capacitors in the right position? I don't know. We're going to find out in a second. Okay, let's do this. Cross your fingers for me and see. Okay, contact. And this takes a while because it's looking for the disk drive. That's normal. It's all normal. Hopefully. Yes! It does still work. Whew. Okay. So I think this recapping was a success. Definitely going to do more work on this machine and put some extensions, expansions, whatever in it. But I'm so happy at this point that this still works at all. So I'm going to leave this on for a while to see if any of the capacitors get hot or anything like that, because that would be an indicator for them being in the wrong polarity. But otherwise, yeah, I didn't completely mess it up at least, so that's good. Yay! I had this running for a while, and it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with it. It just sat there and did its thing, like showing the Kickstart startup screen. So I connected a drive and am going to try stuff out. Yay. Yeah, the picture looks crisp. The sound sounds good, I guess. Let's hear it. Yeah. It is working. So hey, I managed to successfully recap this Amiga 600. This is by no means the only way to do it, but I think it's a legit way of doing it as a hobbyist, as the hobbyist I am, and probably you are too. So maybe this inspires you to try something like this yourself. It's not rocket science, it is quite fiddly to do it, but it's absolutely doable. And you don't need massively expensive tools. Hot air station is handy, and these are not very expensive these days. Soldering iron is necessary, of course. And some patience. That's the main part of it, I guess. So yeah, hope you found this informative, hope you found it enjoyable. I'd love to see you again on this channel sometime. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for giving thumbs up, thanks for commenting, thanks for your donations. Special thanks for my Patreon supporters who make stuff like this possible. And extra special thanks to Katrina for donating this machine to me, of course. Yeah, that's it for now, I guess. I'm Jan Peter. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.